Today we're making these awesome motion graphics in Fusion, kind of a stop motion-y cutout sort of feel with lots of texture. And we're gonna learn a ton of motion graphics techniques along the way. So to get this started, I'm gonna go up to our workspace and let's reset our UI layout. And I'm gonna go to the upper left and open up our media pool. And I'll right click here in the empty part of our media pool, go down and say new Fusion composition. And we'll call this graphics 1 and hit create. That'll create that composition here in the media pool, and I'll double click on it. And that'll open up our blank composition here in Fusion. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hide our buttons down here just so we have a little bit more screen real estate. Up here in workspace, let's just untick show page navigation. The first thing we're gonna do is put down a background. That'll give us a background color, and it'll also set the composition size. So I'll just drag a background node down in there and connect it to our media out. Let's select that background, and over here in the inspector, we'll twirl down our color picker here, and I'm just gonna pick kind of a orangey background like this. And now let's get our text going. So I'll take the third icon over here, grab the text, and I'll take the output of the text and drag it over the output of our background, and that'll automatically make a merge node and put the text into the foreground. And with the text node selected, I can go over here and add some text. Let's just say Fusion, like this. And let's pick a font. I really like Poppins, and we'll just do maybe Poppins Black, maybe push up the tracking a little bit, and we'll push the size up. There we go. This should already be aligned pretty much in the middle. And let's also pick a color. Let's do kind of a dark purplish blue, a little bit desaturated, something like that. And now let's get some kind of animated little elements on here. I want to make a little bar that goes across the bottom. And so let's just grab another background, drag this down. I'll hit F2 to rename this. We'll call this, say, bar underscore BG. Take the output and merge it over our background like this. That'll make a black screen. Let's make this more of kind of a dark red, something like that. And I'm gonna take a rectangle mask and drag this above our bar background and connect it here to our mask input. And now I can size this bar. Let's just make this roughly the size of our text, and we'll just grab this widget and drag it down, something like that. And that's good to start out with. And I want this to fill with different colors. By the way, I've been getting a lot of inspiration lately from this guy, Ben Marriott, who is a motion graphics wizard that works a lot in After Effects. And I was inspired by this graphic right here with these rectangles moving, and I just thought that'd be something fun to build. So we're gonna go for something like that. So we have our rectangle here, and there are a lot of ways we can fill this with a different color. One easy way would be to just grab a color corrector like this, drop this on, and make sure that we have our pre-divide post-multiply option selected here. And we could do something like change the hue, maybe pump up the saturation and the gain a little bit. We kind of move this around, maybe make that like a purple. And then we could connect a rectangle mask to this color corrector like this. And now that color correction is only going to happen inside of that rectangle. So we'll just size this to be sort of close to our bar's size. Doesn't have to be 100%. I'm just gonna line this up on that right side there. And let's animate this. To help us out with animation, I'm gonna open up our keyframes panel like this. And I'm also going to hit this little button right here, which is going to push our inspector up, kind of move that out of the way so we have a little bit more room down here in our keyframes. Push the keyframes to the right, and I'll hit this little button right here, this zoom to fit. So now we can see our timeline here. And I think I'll just have this fill over, half a second or so, so maybe 12 frames. And I'm just gonna click this little keyframe diamond right here to keyframe our center for our mask. And then here at frame 0, we'll push this over to the left. And that's going to animate the mask for our color corrector and fill in that bar. Zoom this in a little bit, but I don't like how that's animating. I feel like it's too jerky. So I can select both of my keyframes here and hit F on the keyboard to flatten out those keyframes. You can see just a little bit how this line is more of a curve right here. It's a little bit easier to see in the spline panel. If I open that up and click displacement, here we can see these keyframes have been eased out. There we go. We have this kind of coming in like that. In fact, I might even pick this spline panel up and grab this handle, and I can hold down Alt and drag this to the left to sort of change this shoulder shape. And now it will ease in even more, whoosh, like that. So good. Okay, let's lift this up and let's do one more color here. In fact, actually, I want to have this end not quite off the side. So we'll just push this like this. So now it just goes to to the end like that. And let's do sort of the same thing again. I'll select this and hit Control C and Control V, and then I'll hold down Shift and drag this in between our color corrector and our merge. And we're doing a little bit different color correction here. So let's just change this to be something we like. Something like that. Take our gain down a touch. Maybe we'll go for more of a orangish. Yeah, take that saturation down. Something like that. And this time at frame 12, we'll put this over here like that. And now as we change the hue on this first color corrector, it's kind of flowing to the second color corrector. So if we like that, I mean, it works out. The other thing that we could do would be just to merge another background over this. So if I take this, merge a background over it like that, and then I could just take the same rectangle and apply it to the background like that and use this same kind of rectangle here. You could just change this background color to whatever we want. And that might be a little bit easier depending on what we want to do. But you know, this works. That's a way to do it. I think I'll just take these rectangles out and let's not do the color corrector thing. Let's do a merge and a background. We'll throw this rectangle on this merge over here and we'll use our same rectangle mask for that one. We could also just take this bar background and use that as a mask for our background. That would work. And let's do kind of the same thing here. Add a merge, put that rectangle in there. We'll grab another background, copy paste like this, and take the output of this merge and put that into the mask input of our background. And that's just limiting this. So now we can just pick the color we want. So I don't know, let's do maybe something like pink. Maybe this one will be a little bit more red, something like that. Move this around until it's something we like. And now we have both of our colors animating on at the same time. So if I take these keyframes, I'll just select these two masks. That'll bring up our keyframes here. I have an option here under our menu ticked for show only selected tools. Other than that, you can see everything, which is sometimes nice, but I like to usually just select whatever I want to adjust, and then that'll pop up here in the keyframes. And I can twirl these down, and here's where I can grab the keyframes and just move them around if I want to. I can select a bunch of them and move them. I can select a bunch of them and grab this button right here, this time stretch, and I can stretch these out in time, make it shorter or longer, whatever I want to do. But I think we'll just take this second one and just offset it a little bit. So now we have those growing like that. Yeah. And let's do this, but kind of copy it and rotate it up there. And the cool thing about using nodes is you don't usually have to copy things. You can usually just plug things into multiple different nodes. And so I can take the output of this, which is sort of like its own group, right? If I hit 1 on the keyboard and bring this up, this is kind of like what you would think of in After Effects as like a pre-composition. It's like everything all in one group almost. It's like one object. Anytime it goes through a merge, everything pretty much becomes one object, right? So I can take this and I can put this multiple places in my comp, and I can just go over this output right here and make another merge. And I've merged this over itself. So if I take this and move it, we can see there's actually 2 of them, right? So at this point, I can reset that, and I could do something like just type in 180 on the angle. And look at this. Now we have this duplicated and rotated. And I don't even have to do anything fancy. I just merge it over itself again with a rotation, right? Now, something that I would like to do generally is not do this angle inside of the merge, just because I like to be able to see everything that's happening here in the nodes. And so instead of doing that, I'll probably just take a transform node and put it here, just for the reason that I can see it in the node graph instead of having it hidden in this merge. But there's nothing really wrong with doing it in the merge. It's the same thing. It's just a little easier to figure out what's going on by reading the node graph, right? Okay, so now we have some pretty epic stuff going on here. And because this is duplicating the same thing, if I make a change anywhere up here, it's gonna flow down to both of these. In fact, I think what I'll do is I want this rectangle to animate on first. And so again, I think I'll take these keyframes here, select these and move these over just a bit. And before those start going, we're gonna animate this first rectangle on. We can do that by adding another mask, and I'll just add that mask after the original rectangle. You can modify another mask by adding a mask after it. So if I just take this and put this down here, right here in between my rectangle 1 and my bar background, I now have another rectangle. And by default, it adds the mask to it, which isn't really what we want. Here where it says paint mode, I can set this to do different things. Add, subtract. Now subtract's almost what we want, but we actually want to subtract everything outside of it. So we'll just say invert. So now we have a mask that's masking that mask. And look at all the cool stuff we can do. Look at that. You can do all kinds of neat things just with this one mask. That's pretty fun. But I think what we'll do is let's make this wide enough. And we're just going to have this kind of do a similar reveal. In fact, we could probably even just take the same kind of mask. Let's just copy this rectangle 2, put that there. I'll hold down Shift to drag this one out and Shift to drag this one in like this. And again, let's take this paint mode and make this subtract inverted. Now let's see it. Oh, baby, it's happening. We just got to change the timing here. Move this down towards the beginning. Have this happen a little faster. Yes, there we go. Only problem is this end point isn't quite over far enough. So let's make sure that's all the way over. There we go. So now, whoop, whoop, whoop. Very cool. Okay, so we have our animated little bars here. Let's add some more animation, shall we? Let's take this text and animate that. Now, there are so many ways you could animate text, but we're going to use something called a follower. And a follower just animates the different characters in a word or different words or whatever over time. And it kind of offsets the keyframe animation that we add to it. So I can just right click here in our text and we'll just say follower. And that's going to add a modifier back here. Doesn't really tell us about it, but it's there. And by default, our delay is at 0. And we have a bunch of different things that we can keyframe here. So let's just go to shading. And here, if we scroll down, we have something called position. Now this is position of the first layer of our text, which is the only layer that's on. So that works out. And what we're going to do is animate this offset. And so within about 1 second, let's say in 24 frames, our offset's going to end up here. And so I'm going to click this keyframe diamond and it's going to open a path. This is just something that it does when you're animating this kind of specific thing. You can just go back to follower and scroll back down. And now we have this offset, and up here at frame 0, I'm going to push this offset down a little bit, something like that. So now everything kind of pops up like that. But because we did this in the modifier, we can go up here to timing and I can make a delay between each character like this. And look what happens. Now we have everything rising at different times. We can make a little bit more delay, pushing that here. And this is the delay in frames. Let's have this be 6 frames or so in between like that. Nice. Let's actually take this first position down quite a bit. So now these all pop into place, bloop, 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 like that. And it looks like we manually animated each of these, but it's procedural. So we can take this text and anything that we add to this text, it's going to animate on as well, which is really powerful. So I can switch this word at any time and it's still going to animate on the same way, which is pretty neat. So we'll just keep this at Fusion. And so now we have all of these popping up like that, and we could mask this text so that these kind of rise up out of nothing. So we'll just make this text nice and wide in case we want to make the word longer. So now these will kind of just rise up out of nothing. Yes, good. Good, good. So we have our first layer kind of animated with our Fusion text there. But we can go over to shading and add more layers. I like to just start with number 3, black shadow, and hit enabled. And that's going to add a drop shadow here. And I don't quite want exactly a drop shadow. Let's actually make this maybe more of a white. And let's take the softness all the way back down like that. And maybe change our position. Now we have kind of this drop shadow thing. We can even use an image to stylize this and everything, but I'm just going to make a gradient here. And for this bottom one, let's do kind of a warmish yellow. Top one we'll do kind of like that. There we go. Just have a little bit of a subtle gradient there. And now those letters kind of just lift into place. Also maybe just gonna take these lines, spread them apart a little bit. I can do that with just a transform, and I'll just bring this down a little bit. And it's spreading them apart because we're taking this transform and flipping it. That's the nice thing about working like this, is you can always add something procedurally anywhere you want. Let's add a little bit of grime here. I'll go to my media pool and I have a couple of textures here. I'll just drag this texture in, bring it up on our first viewer. And this is just a still with just kind of some little spots and everything here. And I can take the output of this and put it over a merge like this. Let's take this and just under apply mode, just go to screen. That's going to add these kind of little white dots and everything around it. And that already does quite a bit. We could do something like add a brightness and contrast before we merge it. I'm going to make sure to clip black and white. We can take this, kind of push the low end up here's what we're doing. We're just kind of making the darker parts darker so that we aren't adding these lighter parts on there, something like that. Now we have these little dots, but I want this to be animated. I don't want to just have this texture just sitting there. Let's make it look like it's kind of grimy film, you know, like each frame has a bunch of dust on it or something like that. And to do that, you could use kind of a film grime QuickTime or something like that, but we can just make our own by doing something kind of crazy here. This is a little bit higher resolution than our comp. This is 4200 wide. And so if I grab something like a transform here, we can see how big this is. And so I could take this and just grab like one corner of this, like this, and I could use various parts of this and it's going to look like it's a totally different frame. Nobody's going to know it's different parts of this same image. And so why don't we just start right here, and I'll just keyframe the center, and then I'll move forward, I don't know, 5 or 6 frames, and we'll just take this and move it to a different place, move forward a few frames, move it to a different place, move forward a few frames, and so on. And we can kind of do this for as many variations of this thing as we want. And now we'll have this kind of moving around, which is almost what we want. We don't really want this to kind of look like it's snowing, right? And so I can take this transform and I could go to something like the spline panel. And here is our graph of our motion. Well, I can select all of these keyframes and tick either step in or step out. And look what happens. If I hit step in, it makes these stair steps. And that means that it just holds that keyframe's value until the next keyframe, and then it goes immediately to the next keyframe. It doesn't, which will make it just kind of jump to the next place. Then I could take all of these and I can loop this. And watch this. If I right click with these selected, I can go to set loop and loop like this. And now look what happens. I take this and it will loop through all of that animation forever. And it looks like we have these kind of animated film imperfections, right? Oops, we have this other keyframe here. I'll get rid of that. We just want the stairs right like this, set loop, loop. There we go. So now this will just loop through those different places. And look what's happening here with our image. It's just moving to different corners of that image. And now we have kind of a cheap way to make our own looping overlay. So easy. That's cool. And we built that all in this transform node. I can just select this transform node and let's rename this. Let's call this offset motion loop. Let's rename this media in. We'll call this speckles. And now that's over everything. Let's get some more dirt. I'll grab our media pool and let's grab another piece of some grunge texture. This is a little bit finer and we're going to do sort of the same thing. Let's put this over our image, but I actually want these speckles to be dark and the rest of this to be light. So I'll hit Shift Spacebar. That'll bring up my Select Tool palette, and I'll type Invert, N-V-E-R-T, and that'll give us Invert Color. I'll hit Enter, and that'll invert this and make black things white and white things black. That means that I can take this merge and go to Apply Mode, Multiply, and now we have this kind of dark texture over here. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could copy this offset motion from our speckles onto the other one? Well, we can. I can grab this, and I'll just hit Copy, Control-C, select this invert color and hit Control V for paste. And if they're relatively the same size, which this should work just fine, that's going to jump around too, and it's going to give us the same effect with a different image. That's the nice thing is you can always just run that image through the same node and get a really similar thing. So now we have a really dirty looking thing. Let's take this blend down a little bit, make it not quite so crazy. Same thing here for our merge 6. And now we have a little bit more character. That's nice. Now, I really like this sort of stuttery motion. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to make this motion right here stutter? Well, back in my After Effects days, I was used to an effect called posterized time. And what it did was take this smooth motion like this, and it made it kind of jumpy, stair-steppy. A lot like we did with this animation here, pretty much the same thing, but it does it with time. And Fusion doesn't have a built-in effect for that, but we can actually make our own, which is pretty crazy. That's one cool thing about working in Fusion is you can make your own effects pretty dang easily, and you can save them as presets. You can share them with other people. It's nice. I'm going to start with a time stretcher node like this. And what this node does, if I hit 2 on the keyboard, is it just remaps whatever time you want to show on screen. And you can use this source time to sort of scrub through what time you want to show on screen. And then you can animate that, right? So I'm actually going to go here to my keyframes and just uncheck both of those keyframes. So I don't have any keyframes on this. And instead of animating this myself, I'm going to select this and hit equals. That's going to bring up our expressions. And I'm going to type a really easy expression. I can start with time. I've hit enter. This is basically going to do nothing now. This time stretcher is going to play whatever frame we're on, and it's going to look up that frame. So if we're on frame 67, it's going to play frame 67. But what I can do is I can add a little bit of math called floor, F-L-O-O-R, like this, and I'll put time in parentheses. Now what floor will do is it will round time to the nearest integer. Now it's already in integers, so it's going to work fine. But if we said time, let's say divided by 2, then it's going to divide whatever our time is. And normally 75 would be 37.5. It's going to round it down to 37. And then we just multiply that by that same number like this. And what that's going to do, if we divide it by 2, is nothing. But if we divide this by 6, and then I click nearest like this, what that's going to do is posterize that time. And it's really only going to use every 6th frame from our original stuff here. So we can make this like 3. That's going to pretty much use a third of the frames. So now we have this kind of stuttery look, which looks pretty neat. So I'll hit F2 and we'll call this posterize, and we'll just run it through that like this. And because I use this enough, I've just made my own macro called posterize time with a nice little slider where I can change the frame duration. And so if frame duration is 1, this pretty much looks exactly the same, right? But if frame duration is 6, then it's going to like that. So let's make this like 3 for now. And now we have a little bit more of that kind of stuttery look. Awesome. Now let's take these edges and roughen these a little bit. You can do that a few different ways, but I think before our transform here, let's add a displacement. So I'll select merge 4 and type displace. And then all we have to do is take a fast noise and run that into the green input of the displace. And if I hit 1 on the keyboard, I can bring up the noise. We want to put a lot of detail in this and push the scale up, and look what happens. This kind of roughens these edges, right? So let's do like 40, and we'll take this displace and take this refraction strength and turn that down. And the closer that is to 0, the less craziness happens. But I can push that up a little bit, and now we have this subtle kind of roughening of the graphics there. Cool, right? We could animate this fast noise by pushing up the seethe rate, and we'll make that a little bit bigger like that. And now we have that a little bit rough. I think I'll maybe push this scale up even more and take this refraction strength down a touch, just so it's very subtle. Yes. Now it looks like a little bit more hand-drawn. And we could add that to the letters too if we want. But I like it like this. That looks cool. The last thing I'll do is add a little bit of a shake. We can do this again with another transform node. Just put this transform node here. And again, we're going to use another modifier here under where the center is. I'll right click on center and go to modify with perturb. Perturb wiggles things back and forth. And by default, it's way too strong. So let's just take the scale to 0, 0, and let's just push up that scale just a touch on both sides. And now we have this moving ever so slightly. We'll push up the speed a little bit, and you see what we're getting at there. And since we're already running this through the posterized time, it's going to just jump to that space. In our transform, we'll just push this sizing up a little bit so we aren't losing the edges around here. Now we have a really nice effect that just looks like we spent 1,000,000 hours on it, but it was pretty easy to do. So this is great for a nice little title. And again, anytime we want to, we can change this text, call this, part 1, and it's already animated again, because everything's procedural. That's just nice. You can do so much stuff in Fusion, and it's such a great tool for motion graphics. I'm having so much fun. Any requests for certain kinds of motion graphics or anything, let me know in the comments. Also, make sure to check out that free Fusion workshop, the 9 nodes you need to know to make almost anything in Fusion. And I hope to see you there, Hope to see you doing stuff there. Until then, I hope that your graphics are motionful and your effects are visual. I don't know. Thanks for watching.